I'm recording my homily for the second Sunday of Lent in 2020, and it looks familiar from the first Sunday of Lent because I'm recording at the exact same time, the exact same location. The only thing that's changed, I think, is the sun has moved a little bit. So, all right. This Sunday is the Transfiguration, the story of the Transfiguration that we have in the Gospel, right? So you have this Sunday, Jesus going up to the mountaintop. Now, if you remember last Sunday, Satan took Jesus up to a mountaintop to promise him all this splendor and glory, right? As all a lie. So Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up on this mountain, and God the Father's there, God the Holy Spirit's there, Moses is there, Elijah's there, and it's this magnificent and powerful moment, right? And so that's where we're going to be today for the Gospel. Now, I want to back up just for a second. So I want to talk about just the seriousness of some of the things going on. So right now we're kind of in the midst of this scare with the coronavirus, right? It's very serious. And I think when I just kind of reflect on everything I'm hearing in the news and just talking to people in general, people seem to be taking life a little more seriously. I mean, some decisions that would be no big deal, now they think twice about and they take it more serious. You know, should I go to work today? Or am I worried that, I could get sick or something like that? Should I go to work today? Should I let the kids go to school? Is it safe? Should I go to the store? What if I touch something that was just touched by somebody who has the coronavirus? It's all these thoughts and fears that can come into our hearts and minds that make us take some of these decisions a little more serious. This is kind of new for us as people in Western Washington because we don't have events like this that cause us to take life more serious. The economy's just rocking, right? It's been really great. Life is good. People really aren't struggling for the most part. We never get hit by hurricanes here. We don't have tornadoes. We don't have things that cause us and force us to take life a little more serious. So we have this. People are more serious, right? And I can imagine workers, people who work in hospitals, it's even much more serious because you're entering into an environment where it could be dangerous to yourself. And so you have to choose it. You have to choose to make this act of love for the sake of others in the community and go to work, right? And take care of them. And so what we see in all of this is the difference between us acting in fear and us acting in love. In situations like this, it tends to bring out the best in people, those who choose love, and the worst in people, those who choose fear. Now, fear can take different forms. Fear can even take the form of greed, right? Somebody was sharing the story the other day. I was in the office, and they were in the store, and there was a woman who was basically emptying the entire shelf of hand sanitizers into her cart, leaving nothing, right? So this person walks up to her and says, can I just have one of those? And the woman said, no. Now, what we're hearing is that on the internet, people are reselling these hand sanitizers for an enormous markup. What would cause a person to even think of that? Say, here's a scary situation for everybody. It's dangerous. I'm going to now financially benefit from all of that. Greed, right? It's horrible. Brings out the worst in people. That's evil. It's evil when we think of ourselves when our community needs us to think of them, right? It's horrible. So, but it also brings out the best in people. So we have to become more serious, right? So we go back up onto the mountain, Transfiguration. Now, Peter doesn't quite get it in this moment about what it means, the seriousness of it. And so Peter, in this moment of exuberation, says, hey, Jesus, I'll build you 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. Now, what does that all mean? Well, I don't know, but it sounds a little silly. It sounds like, well, how would that help, right? What would that do? Jesus doesn't even respond to him, just ignores him. But then God the Father, as it says, interrupts him. Before he was finished speaking, God the Father, this voice from heaven comes down and says, Peter, zip it, right? Listen to my beloved Son. Listen to him. Don't talk, just listen. Observe, take it in. You're not here to talk. I think that's a powerful moment of understanding adoration, right? In the church, prayer. When you come into the church and we can sit there and we can talk Jesus' ear off. We can talk him to death. And Jesus, God the Father will say, hey, zip it, man. Just listen. Just listen and observe. Take it in. But it's this seriousness of the moment, right? My spiritual director called me, I think it was on last Wednesday, and he said we were going to have to cancel spiritual direction. We were supposed to have spiritual direction on Friday. And I kind of knew that call was coming. I mean, it's not that I could foretell it, but I kind of knew something like that could happen because my spiritual director is the pastor in Kirkland. This is Father Kurt Nagel, right? And Kirkland has been ground zero of the coronavirus. Now, primarily because of one nursing home in Kirkland. It's just been hit really hard by this. So he calls me up on Wednesday and he says, we got to cancel spiritual direction because I've been quarantined. Why was he quarantined? Because he went into that nursing home to anoint somebody who was dying. And I kind of knew that was coming because when I spent the summer with him, he had this practice where every day he would go and try to anoint someone or visit someone either in the hospital, the nursing home, or somebody who was homebound. And he was pretty darn faithful with that. He's a great priest. He's a great pastor. One of the reasons I've chosen him as my spiritual director is because I'm always going to have someone to look up to. Because I know I'm never going to get quite to his level, but it gives me something to desire and to shoot for, right? I wonder if that's the whole purpose of the Transfiguration, was eventually down the line, Peter, James, and John would always have something to shoot for, something to look up to, right? And say, this is it. This is why we're doing what we're doing. So later on, when Peter's, in prison, Peter's out in the town square and people are rejecting him, he can remember that moment of the Transfiguration, right? Something to look up to. Well, I kind of knew that would happen with my spiritual director, because he's just a good pastor. Now, I think at the time they didn't know what was happening when he went into that nursing home. But I don't think it would have stopped him. He just loves his people. And so he's not acting in fear, but he's acting in love, even putting himself at risk, right? And a lot of other people have been doing the same thing in different ways. Firefighters, right? Police officers do it. When they show up on a scene, they don't have a choice. They have to be there. So, my spiritual director has reminded me that in the seriousness of this event, to act in love. I'm reading a book right now that ties a lot into this, and it's a book written for priests, and it's interesting because it's written by someone who's not a priest. He's a layman. And he really struggled on whether or not he should write this book because he's not a priest, right? And he says, well, what can I tell priests? I'm not one of them. How can I possibly understand them? But the reason he wrote the book is because he says, in the last 10, 15 years as priests, man, it's been hard. It's been really challenging. It's like everything that's out there about priests is something really negative, something bad. And he wasn't writing the book just to make us feel good, like, hey, group hug, priests are great. He wasn't doing that. But he wanted us to remember the purpose and the power and the beauty of our role in the world. And so much of the book is stories about, he's like, priests, act in love. Pour yourself out for your people. Your people need you. They need the sacraments. They need the gospel. They need your example, your words and your actions. They need it. Allow God to work through you. And I find it so uplifting and so encouraging. It's a great book. Part of that book, he tells it from the perspective of his uncle, who was a priest. Father Tom. He was a priest in Washington, D.C. Now he's been deceased now for a few years. He was actually killed by a homeless man who broke into his rectory and killed him, right? But this uncle who was a priest was actually a really, really holy priest, a really good priest. Again, one of these priests who's just kind of on a level above the rest of us, someone that we can look up to. But he just shared a couple stories, and one of them was, so his uncle got to know this one particular family in his parish really, really well. He was very at home with them. So he said he could go to visit this family, he could walk in the back door, go in the refrigerator, get something to drink, sit down in the living room, kick off his shoes, and just feel totally at home, right? So he was very comfortable with this family. This one particular night, now a little more background, their teenage son in this family had an illness at this particular time, and the doctors couldn't figure it out. And the son was losing a ton of weight. Anytime he did eat, he would just vomit it back up. Nothing was staying down. And he was going to doctor after doctor after doctor. They couldn't figure out what it was. And the family was beginning to think that, he might die from this. This is just really scary. Well, this one night, the priest knocks on the front door, which was unusual, right? Because usually he would just let himself in the back. So he knocks on the front door, and the dad opens the door, and the dad sees him, and he's happy to see him, and so he starts kind of joking around with him, right? Not very serious, kind of like Peter on the Mount of the Transfiguration, right? And the priest is like, no, I just need to see your son. And he had his anointing kit with him. He had his oils with him. And so the dad immediately recognized there was something very serious happening here. The priest was not there as a friend, he was there as a priest for them. He was there as a shepherd. And so without really talking to him, he just goes in and he anoints the teenage son. He gives him the anointing of the sick, and he spends a lot of time praying with him. When he's done, he just leaves. No small talk, just leaves. The next morning, the teenage son wakes up. He's like, Mom, Dad, can I have breakfast? He never had a single problem after that night. Now, yes, it's beautiful. It's a miracle. It's those things that God does in the midst of true faith and holiness, right? But for me, what got me was this priest who chose to be this instrument and to hear God's voice and to act on it in a very serious but powerful way, in which he's choosing to forgo perhaps his own wants or desires in that moment to be present to that family. And so what would have been in any other situation, a normal act, it becomes something heroic because it's God acting and he's obeying. My spiritual director, who, like all of us as priests, we go and anoint people all the time, which seems like a routine thing as a priest. But then when you do it and you realize that maybe you're putting yourself in harm's way, it instantly becomes an act of heroism, because it takes more love, because the situation's more serious, right? So I think a good thing for us is just we look at the little things or the big things in our life that require us to be more serious. The discipline of our daily prayer, right? The small acts of charity, the not acting in fear but acting in love, all of a sudden become acts of heroism when we're doing God's will. All right? God bless you, and I will see you next week for the third week. Take care.